Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. I'm extremely happy to meet you all in this podcast of the BRM Asia Brown Bag podcast session. Uh, as a part of this Brown Bag podcast sessions, we interview BRM practitioners who bring in real world experience of their journey in BRM. And as part of the Asia Pacific regional ambassador role, I am so glad to interview today Sonali Mukherjee, who is a practicing BRM from India. Good morning, Sonali. How are you doing?
Good morning, Suresh. It's so nice to see you in the podcast today, especially the timing that we are in right now. So thanks a lot for welcoming me. And
Yeah,
I'm really excited for the session.
excellent. So, as a part of our community building exercise, we have been talking with practicing BRMs on their journey because a lot of these aspects of BRM is it's like a marathon and it takes enough amount of practice to build the capability around. But before even we get into that, why don't you give us a quick introduction about your total experience in the IT industry and what you've been doing in the last 5 years for viewers?
Absolutely. So, Suresh, I'm been a BRM professional with 21 years of industry experience, and I lead a BRM practice for a large professional services. And in my role, I'm responsible for the region in terms of demand shaping to value realization for my business. I also work very closely with my business partners in developing business and IT strategy that is aligned to the value and the business that we bring. I'm a BRM professional certified, PMP certified, Scrum certified, and I also finished my executive leadership program with ISB in innovation and change management. So that's precisely my role and my experiences. And in the BRM journey, which is like last 5 years, I've been in this journey of BRM practice. And when we started this journey, industry was not as matured as it today from a BRM point of view, and very few people knew about what BRM is. Some of those roles was done by portfolio managers or team leaders or account managers, but professionally called as a BRM practice, there were very few people who knew about it. So that is when I started my journey 5 years ago. When I started the role, I was the only person at that role in a leadership point of view. And it took a while for us, almost 3 to 4 years, to buy in that role and establishing that role for the practice. So we built that team. Now we have a professional, it's a large team now. The first challenge, or I would say the first milestone that we covered, is really establishing that role as a BRM and giving that clarity of the role. Because, as I mentioned, there were similar roles done by others, and then why do you need a BRM in that role? So, establishing that role, giving that clarity, and what value BRM can bring was the key that I had to establish in my journey. The second thing is really establishing very strong BRM practice. And that means what kind of practitioners are really bring value. It is just not going to be very IT driven BRM practitioners. It also how much do you really understand the business, because that is a very important for the roles that we play. Not about just being a IT innovators, but also how you can really innovate business by providing IT solution. So I think the second most important milestone that I covered was really establishing a very strong BRM practice or a practitioners in my organization. And then building just not the practitioners, but also building a discipline. And that is building an internal eminence in terms of building a capability as a BRM. And that really was another path or the journey that we took for a couple of time to really educating our internal teams and then external, rather I would say our business partners about the BRM role. So as I mentioned, I think first two milestones, one is establishing the role. Second was really building the practice or building that BRM team was key for the journey that I took. And third is, I think the biggest challenge that we usually face in these kind of a role is building that credibility and the trust within the internal providers organization,
Yeah,
and then having that buy-in from them.
yeah.
And that was the third milestone that took a while for us to kind of really overcome. And I would say today, in the journey of 5 years, the team has been building the value or bringing the results that is needed. And now we are kind of in a good path to follow. So that's kind of a journey that I had, Suresh, in terms of my 5 years in the BRM role.
Excellent, Sonali. A couple of questions is as women leader, how much do you think is a challenge to drive some of these initiatives? And particularly, I'm asking is that and that's a very important aspect that we want to drive on in terms of women leadership, particularly in the technology space. We don't find a lot of women leaders in technology. So, from your 21 years, more than 2 decades, how have you seen your role from a leadership standpoint, and have you had challenges, or do you think that was there any kind of trade-off that in terms of, because to kind of get things done you have to push it even more harder? How has been that experience as women leader within your different organizations that you work
So I would say, Suresh, I have been lucky in that space in a lot of ways, because in my organization, I was the first woman IT leader in the boardroom.
with? Excellent.
And there was, I would say, it was just not me. I did get a lot of support from my leadership and my organization to be there on the table.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about like 11, 12 years ago.
Sure.
That's where I started my journey as an IT woman business leader.
Right.
And I think when we started that journey as a woman leader, there are things that you have to start looking in terms of natural pushbacks that you get sometimes.
Sure.
And the moment you see a woman in the team, you will think, oh, she must be representing talent, or that's a kind of a mindset people would have. And
Got
then
it.
you really have to articulate again and again. So one of the skill that I've used is really articulating my role again and again, as and when I introduce myself or my team into that room. So
Sure.
that was one of the challenge, like, there's a mindset suddenly when you see a woman and then you think, oh, she is from probably a talent organization and things like that.
Right.
So that was one of the challenge that I overcome as a woman leader. Second is, I think establishing that role requires equal amount of experience, both as an IT professional
Right.
and a business professional. So when I'm talking, there's a line between how much do you need to know the business. And for me, it was, you really have to embed yourself into the business.
Right.
Unless you are not, they don't see you as a business person. Business partner will not trust you.
Correct.
And similarly, when you are in the IT side, you really have to embed, or you have to become an ambassador for your team, that you are there to support them if there are challenges. If you are the person who's going to bring them more projects or opportunities. So I think that's a fine balance that you have to manage. And it took again a while for us to kind of overcome that challenge, being a being a leader.
That's great. And in terms of when you talk about BRM as a practice, how was it? How did you go about establishing the trust with your business partners? How did you kind of articulate the value of BRM in place? Because that is a kind of a new role altogether, or new function altogether. So was it kind of challenging to formalize your role as a BRM and what value they would kind of do? Because probably it's a service delivery team or the application development team, which is already doing it across, where they're kind of finding it difficult to understand what value this BRM is going to happen, and how did you socialize that aspect within your business partner teams?
So I'll just use a example. Like, so when it comes to IT, I think as an IT professionals, we like to make things very complex. We will use a complex IT language, and it's always about technology, and it's always, we as an IT professional, the passion that we bring on the table, will always talk about what technology we can apply or implement versus what business solution problem we can solve. So I think for me, it was the, I would say, a breaking point. I would say that was the point where I was able to make or simplify IT into a very business language. And because in my previous life, I was a business, I came from a business, so I did understand the business side of it. So for me, going back to the business partners and talking about IT in a very business language was the key.
Yeah,
And business started really understanding, yes, this is what they need. And rather than talking to them about IT, I started talking about the value that we can bring.
sure.
Instead of talking about cost, I started talking about what value this project or this solution can bring. So I think that was where I was able to build the trust with the business, and were able to kind of really move into this role much more quickly.
Sure. And in terms of building up a team, that's a big challenge in
Yes.
itself. How do you hire people? How do you but
Hmm.
generally what kind of skills do you require? And you've been a practicing BRM and managing such a larger team as part of the professional organization. What kind of skills do you look at for someone who's aspiring to be a BRM? What would be key attributes?
So I'll just take a step back. So few things. One is when you are establishing a practice, certain skills you would require. I would say you need to have a combination of people who are internal and external.
Hmm.
So when I'm talking about internal resources, I think they bring a lot of experience from a firm perspective
Sure.
because navigating in the firm becomes very critical.
True.
So that is one of the skill that really understanding the business,
Mhm.
understanding the firm becomes very critical for this role. Second is, I would say, a very powerful communication.
Mhm.
It's a communication skills, how you communicate, how you negotiate, and how do you really bring the consultative mindset on the table becomes very critical. Second, I would say really having the change management or not being afraid of the change and taking that risk. I
Sure.
think that is a very important skill that I see as a BRM professional. You have to be very, very, very important. And certain skill, like it's not that the day one you hire a person, you bring all that skills. You also build that skill over the period.
Sure.
Third skill I would say is more in terms of understanding the business acumen or business innovation.
Yeah.
Like how do you really have the technology skills to innovate the business? So
Sure.
can you have that conversation? Can you have those kind of skills also or not? And I would say portfolio management becomes very critical because as a part of a BRM, you do manage, optimize portfolio, you build the portfolio, and you also manage the cost and the budget of the portfolio.
Sure.
So you really have to understand and understand the prioritization or the, I would say, or the kind of different skills that industry right now have, whether it's a Scrum, Agile, DevOps, really understanding that and really apply those skills into the portfolio management.
Sure.
And I think the last I would like to mention is being a strategic partner. How do you have all the skills to become a strategic partner for your businesses? So these were the key competencies I would say when I was building the team. I ensured either I hired people with the similar skill set
Sure.
or I have them build those skills over the period of time.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's spot on in terms of what you talk about the DNA, the DNA
Mm.
of BRM in terms of six competence.
Right.
One of the things that I see as part of the whole thing is that how to get a seat at the table. And people are struggling. I'm not talking as a part of BRM function, but even if you are having a BRM to go there and do it, people want to earn the seat at the table quickly. So, what is your take on a tactical BRM's role and a strategic BRM role? Does it take time? What is your experience in your journey towards navigating to get a seat at the table? I mean, I know that's a lot of hard work and sweat to get to that table, but want to get your perspectives of differentiating between a tactical BRM and a strategic BRM.
Right. Suresh, this is a journey. It doesn't take the first day you start your role as a BRM and people will give you a seat on the table.
Right.
That's very impractical, if I would say.
Sure.
It took a while for us to have that journey to cover, and I would also say that you really need to really assess
Hmm.
the business or the business that you're serving, whether they are ready to have you as a strategic partner or not.
Right.
And basis on that, you need to start looking at how much time you're really spending in tactical task versus strategic task.
Sure.
So for me, as one of the key performance index that I have for my team is start evaluating how much time you're spending in tactical work
Sure.
and operational work that you can start handing it over to the operations team or service management team
Right.
and becoming more strategic in terms of your approach. Second is in terms of how do you really convert a cost-based conversation to a value-based conversation. The moment you start having why I'm paying this and what is the cost, I think that's a conversation you really have to avoid
Sure.
and start thinking about how do I really start talking about the value or the benefit that my business is going to get after the investment that they have made.
Sure.
So I think those are the few things which take some time,
Yeah.
and the kind of a mindset as well. And one of the things which I would say I would I think I would say is as a BRM you have the skill of perseverance and patience.
Sure.
Unless those two things are not there, it becomes very difficult for a BRM to keep that momentum and keep that trust in the system that this will they will be able to overcome that. So
Yeah.
I keep telling that my team, have that perseverance, keep be a little bit more pushy if needed, but then also be very patient when you're dealing with your business partners.
And there's a lot of perceived notion that BRMs are only have to be there for an external facing role. But I see a lot of value in within
Yes.
internal groups itself. So throw us some light on what value do the internal teams within the organizations gain by using BRM? Because there's a wrong notion. People think that BRM should always be client end facing and other stuff. I don't believe that. It's more of a capability and a discipline, as you rightly said. So how does that perception change in terms of, and particularly for BRMs, because BRMs think that they're going to go and talk outside and other stuff. You need to kind of clear your own shop within the
Yes.
inside quadrant. So what is your take?
Yes. I do feel, especially for the internal IT organization, this is a very critical role. And we could see that value because, as I was talking about, IT professionals are not very good in talking about their success stories or the value that they bring. And it is a different skill sets altogether to become an IT developer or a QA tester then becoming an IT BRM professional because this skill require a very in-depth knowledge about the business and talk business language.
Sure.
And it becomes so critical because this is the role which kind of become a point of focus
Correct.
for the team, and a team that can play different role. You can be an orchestrator, you can be a navigator, or you can be a connector in some cases.
Sure.
But I think that is the kind of a role that becomes so critical, and especially for the internal IT organization.
Sure.
And I could really see the value that we were able to bring, the kind of a structure, the operating model that we created. And now I could see that we have, not in all cases, because it takes a time, in many cases we have a seat on the table, and the way we are making the investments in IT now is much more aligned to the business, or I would say more converged to the business priorities that we have.
I think you lose a lot of languages that Aaron Barnes would be especially pleased when we call as business IT convergence. So coming on to the next gear of the BRM Institute. The BRM Institute is on a mission to spread this knowledge
Mhm.
worldwide. And you said you're already a BRMP. How do you see the course or the content of BRM Institute? Does it kind of help you and your teams to upskill themselves and get you the right lingo to talk with your business partners? Tell us about your experience going through that particular journey, and how do you want to leverage BRM Institute courses and different elements for the future of your own organization benefits?
Absolutely, Suresh, and I must thank BRMI for where we are today. Especially, I think last couple of months, once we have done our certification in BRM, we could see a huge change in terms of how we are making changes internally to get the results that is needed. Um, some of the things that I would say, it gives us an industry standard. Like you have industry standard for other things, BRMI gives us an industry standard in terms of how industry is evolving in this space. And I think there are tools, techniques that are something which you can apply immediately in your roles. And we did that. I think whether it is a BRM competency or whether you're talking about the BRM maturity model, which really helped us to kind of evaluate our business leaders, our business partners,
Sure.
and start assigning our people accordingly. So I think there are tools and techniques which you can immediately apply. This is not a course that I would say this is a course that you can really implement. It is not something which is just a theoretical. It is a practical tools and techniques that you can apply in your roles. And I could see a huge value while we did that. So we did align our BRM competency, we aligned our BRM maturity model, we started assessing our stakeholders accordingly. We also have a capability matrix for our providers organization to ensure that we are talking the same language as industry is talking.
Sure.
And all this has really given us a kind of an edge now, especially when a BRM institute came into our organization. We actually created a whole roadmap for a BRM uh, now, not to build just my team's competency, but also building BRM as a discipline or a capability within the organization. So building an internal capability becomes very critical for us, and BRM is really helping us in this journey. So,
Excellent. And you also kind of looking at it, just going this particular knowledge beyond your BRM practice to the rest of the organization. So,
exactly.
what kind of initiatives are you taking in order to kind of socialize this whole concept to a larger part of the enterprise? And how have you been successful in that part? And how has the other business partners and leaders from
Mhm.
different parts have taken that into perspective?
So we started building a kind of, I would say, internal and external capability. So internal capability, when I say, is within the IT organization. And that begins from building a BRM fundamental, which we call it as an Elevate IT kind of a courses, where we started building what are the fundamental skills that is needed in every practitioner, or I would say every leadership role that we have in an IT organization.
Mhm.
And we started kind of doing a day-long sessions on that. Then we moved into kind of really talking about how do we build a similar skill set with our strategic partners that we have,
Mhm. Mhm.
and getting them in the room and having the strategic partner conversation from how do you really manage, identify the journey map, the value maps, and then how do you kind of really build the value realization of the whole courses. I think that conversation, like especially as an IT professionals, we talk about how many bugs we have. That is very easy. But when
Right.
it comes to what value that I bring applying this technology becomes very difficult.
Right.
And this cannot be something just only a BRM who needs to do it. It is
Correct.
something which every key leader, I would say, every leadership role has to do it in each forum or each touch points that they have with business. So for us, I think that roadmap is also equally critical as we build our BRM professionals. How do we really build BRM as a capability or a discipline becomes equally important for us.
I think you're doing a pioneering effort to make this part. I know how much of efforts have gone through this to build a capability. A couple of questions at the last is, what are some of the lessons learned in this whole journey? And you said it is a journey, it takes a while. What are some of the key lessons learned to build such kind of a capability and get that recognition from your business partners that BRM finally is add value, and people have been calling BRMs because they are like kind of becoming indispensable. So, what are some of the lessons learned in creating to a level of that 5 years that you've gone through this journey?
I think one of the thing which I would say more of a success factor now versus a lessons learned, because when we realize that this is probably not going the way it should go, we immediately change our gears or immediately change our drivers. And some of the things that we have done early on is establishing the role.
Hmm.
It becomes so important if we are not establishing the role and giving the clarity of the role,
Correct.
not only to your business partners, but your internal teams. Because eventually your delivery is done by your providers. And if your providers are not really clear about what value or what opportunities that you can bring for them, um, you will not be able to have the trust and the credibility, and your team will not deliver.
Right.
And no matter how much you can go in front of a business and talk about value, if your team is not delivering, you're not done
Correct.
anyways. I
Absolutely.
think establishing that role internally and externally becomes very important.
Hmm.
And where do you position that role also becomes very important. So are you positioning your team within the provider's organization, at a IT leadership level, at a CIO level? What level you're really establishing that role, and what kind of a purview or a scope that you're giving that role also becomes very critical. So
Correct.
I think those are the few things that we learned really early in our process, and we made some changes to ensure that is done. Second thing is what kind of a skill set or a talent you're hiring. This role requires people who are self motivated and self driven.
Sure.
We cannot have people who are more of, I think I would look for skills which is more of um, pioneering or exploring the demands that is needed versus really looking in terms of somebody giving them the guidance or the bullet points. So I think the role in terms of the personality that you hire becomes very important.
Sure.
And as much as I said, the establishing the role. So those two things I would say were lessons learned for me in my journey of 5 years.
Excellent. The last question, I think there's a lot of value you have earned as a BRM practice head, as well as within the function itself. Would you be willing to contribute and share your experience in the wider forum as part of the initiatives that the Asia Pacific group of the BRM Institute is driving? Because I think we need to spread the message of around different parts of it. So would you be kind of keen to help us in the journey to build in more BRM practitioners in this Asia Pacific team, and get to understand that there is someone person real in available that they can reach out and ask questions? Would that be something that you'd be open enough?
Absolutely, Suresh. I think this is going to be something which I'm really passionate about.
Sure.
And I would like to invest time in terms of whether it is coaching some new BRM professionals or volunteering for anything that is needed to make this practice more prominent and strong in Asia Pac region. So anything that I can help to do it, I would really be excited to do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sonali, for spending some valuable time today and sharing your valuable insights with your viewers. I think we all gained a lot from this perspective, and I'm sure that we will look forward to more such conversations as we start to build up virtual meetups in this region. And I'm extremely thankful for your time and really appreciate your insights today.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you to see you and looking forward for another session like this.
Thank you.